Hey, Tyler, let's talk about SunPower.
It's a good time to talk about them. I know a lot of solar stocks are down lately, and I'm sure there's a lot of people looking for value, maybe perhaps in renewable. And with SunPower's stock down, I think over 80%, I'm sure people are looking at it. So let's dig into this baby.
Yeah, it sounds like it's an overdue time because you and I have talked about a lot of companies in the renewable energy over the past years. We've seen the cycle, especially residential and commercial solar. It's been such a brutal part of the cycle. I'm going to bring up on the screen here a chart and talk about what's going on, SunPower stock, and we'll talk about some other stocks too. But first, just a reminder, this video is sponsored by The Motley Fool. If you're looking for even more great stock ideas, go to our special link, go to fool.com/unscripted. The Motley Fool is going to give you its 10 best stocks to buy right now. By the way, I'm Jason Hall. This is Investing Unscripted, in case I didn't say that. Here we go. SunPower stock down a brutal 81% since the beginning of 2023. Some of the reasons why, number one reason is it's been a really ugly year for residential solar. We've seen interest rates have skyrocketed. It's affected the housing market, rising interest rates. People don't just have $30,000 to $50,000 laying around to go out and buy solar to put on their rooftops. Generally, you take out a loan if you want to own it, or you do one of the PPA agreements. Somebody's got to finance it either way. So all of those cost of capital things has gone up. That's really affected SunPower. A lot of times we've talked about like ENPH and SolarEdge, companies that have a lot of exposure to it as well. As bad as it's been for ENPH, SunPower is down even more. I'm going to share one more ticker here too. And this is MAXN Solar Technologies. I wanted to share that because MAXN's part of the SunPower story.
Yes, MAXN Solar was what we actually probably knew SunPower as 10 years ago. SunPower was a manufacturer of solar panels, and they had laid claim to the most efficient solar panels in the world.
This is critically important for rooftop solar, right?
Yes, the power per square foot really matters when we talk about residential solar. And that was what made SunPower so attractive. Also, not for nothing, but it actually had a kind of a nice looking sun panel relative to some of the really like cheap ones from the Chinese commodity markets. If you're putting some $15,000 of equipment on your roof, you want it to look nice, right? So what ended up happening is SunPower kind of consolidated a little bit. They had the panel business, but then it started expanding into development. And in development, it started getting not just commercial, but also residential. And as it started doing that, it became like a residential installer, if you will, but more in like for a lack of a better term, you and I discussed this, it was like a residential broker dealer where it would sell.
It was like the platform with the website where you could go to and submit your information. And then they have local partners that actually do the installation that they partner with. So it's a great platform, relatively smart way to do it really, because you leverage local resources instead of having your own operating costs and staff and trying to be in all the markets. So it's a pretty smart way to do it. But yeah, so they had that business that they grew, but they had other stuff too, right? In part of their development business, at one point they were partnered with First Solar, which is one of the dominant players in commercial. And they bundled all of these deals together because that was another part of their business, was the financing, where they tried to bundle all these things together, and they tried to spin all that off as a third-party yield co called 8.3 Energy Partners, which was an abject failure. This is a company that at some point it's done everything in solar, sometimes more than once.
I should mention too that SunPower is almost directly responsible for the success of ENPH Energy, because I go ahead and pull up the 5 or 10 year chart of ENPH Energy, and you'll see this was a kind of a middling company until all of a sudden it started just absolutely taking off in terms of profitability. And that takeoff moment just happened to coincide when SunPower sold off its microinverter business to ENPH, and then ENPH got exclusive distribution rights to all SunPower made panels. And they became an exclusive provider there, and they could sell to other people as well. But basically, ENPH was this middling company. It wasn't profitable at all. It was barely growing, and it was a highly competitive industry. And it looked like SolarEdge Technologies was just going to dominate this industry. All of a sudden, SunPower swoops in, wants to raise some capital by selling off its microinverter business, gives it to ENPH, and creates one of the most successful wealth-creating engines in the renewable industry in the past 5 years.
Over the past 5 years, and it's down 67% from its high. Even with this massive decline over the past 5 years, the stock has still generated 16x returns, almost 17x returns for investors. ENPH has, while SunPower has actually lost investors' money in toto. not just versus the market, which has done pretty well over the past 5 years. But again, it's a story of a company that has never really found its footing. It's tried to be everything, and now it's more concentrated. So let's talk about that. So what it is today is basically it's an installer and a financer, not exclusively, but almost exclusively for residential.
Like you said, again, for a lack of a better term, a broker dealer is able to bring in sales, bring in customers, has exclusive deals with a lot of home builders to basically install new panels on anything that's a new build. For example, it has partnerships with Meritage Homes, Toll Brothers, Beazer Homes across the United States, which are three relatively large publicly traded home builders. State of California requires all new residential buildings have solar panels on them. So there's a lot of opportunities to either partner with individuals or partner with development companies to do this. And
I want to talk about that just really briefly here. This is one positive thing that we saw again, we don't have the fourth quarter. There's still a couple weeks before they report their full year results. But in the third quarter, again, even the housing market was not great last year. We know that because of rising interest rates, existing inventory was abysmal, and all of the home builders had sold through their inventory in 2021 and 2022, but they still grew that part of their business, new homes installations, 26% in the third quarter. So that's a strong part of the business. And then another strong part of the business too, we're seeing this broadly, is storage, energy storage. Their SunVault is their brand. ENPH, this has been a pretty strong thing. And a lot of that's tied to California, right? Because they've changed their net metering rules. And if you really want to maximize your solar, you need storage to store it when the grid doesn't want your power. And then you can use that power at home, or you can sell it back to the grid. So those parts of the business have done well, but the stock is still down. Why is the stock still down, and what's going on with the business?
A lot of these new businesses are still basically in that startup, not actually operationally profitable. Wet management, I think that slide that you brought up, it was like they generate $1,000 in adjusted EBITDA before platform investments. So we have an adjustment on top of the adjusted EBITDA for its total profitability.
My investor of all time, Charlie Munger, is famous for calling EBITDA BS earnings, only he didn't say BS. So this is adjusted BS, right? And that's important. But I do want to give them a little bit of credit, because what they're saying here, like you said, these businesses aren't at scale, right? They're trying to get them at scale. And they're like trying to give us a little look at, if you get these businesses to like some sort of a scale where they have momentum and you're not having to make your investments in your platform to build it, to bring it up to scale, the potential for it to be a very profitable business is there, but it ain't there yet.
There's some long-term catalysts, because once you have an installed base, some of the things they're looking at is creating what's called a virtual power plant, where like every individual who owns a battery on their solar installation basically becomes like a storage unit that SunPower controls through monitoring and some software that can sell power when it's most profitable to do so, and to take power from the system when it's most profitable to do so, and create a electricity broker in-house, like I said, as a virtual power plant. It's an interesting concept, one that hasn't materialized much in terms of profitability. But if you're building the thesis for this company, on the things we said, it's growing. It seems to be an interesting niche. It's been a business in search of a business for a long time, taking things on, shedding it, trying to determine what business model they want to go with. And this seems to be the one that they have. That all said, there's something to be said about consistency and just blocking and tackling. You mentioned MAXN Solar, you mentioned ENPH Energy, you mentioned, I think in one of the charts, you didn't actually bring it up at First Solar as well. These are companies that have kept it relatively simple. Yes, they have maybe made a venture here or there that haven't been turned out as well, but there haven't been nearly as many changes to the business over time.
Bringing it up on the screen right now, this is looking at that same 5-year period we were talking about before with ENPH. First Solar stock is up 225% over that same 5-year period of time, that's not bad. MAXN, this is more recently, this is since 2020 when they spun it out, when MAXN separated from SunPower, down 87%. It's really taken a bit of a bath as well. And part of that's because the timing of when it was spun out and everything that's happened with residential solar since then. So it makes sense why SunPower separated that business and spun it out. But again, even since then, a lot of the timing has made it really brutal. Here's my question for you, Tyler. We're looking forward. as we always do. 2023 was terrible, and we saw, you and I follow ENPH and SolarEdge really closely. We saw every quarter their numbers got worse, and then the numbers that they guided for the quarter to follow were even worse than that. So we know we're somewhere in the trough here, and at some point the market probably is going to turn back to growth. My question is, thinking about SunPower, is there anything here that's appealing to you about being a cyclical investor in this industry and thinking about this as an opportunity, a stock that might be compelling to think about buying sometime in the near future?
The thing that I keep coming back to for when you compare SunPower to the other renewable energy companies that we've covered a lot before is that SolarEdge Technologies, ENPH, First Solar, these are all companies that have been relatively profitable.
It's the economic results, right?
Years. Right.
They've delivered in the past on
They have
power.
delivered and they have executed on their business plan. And in an extremely competitive business like this, execution is key. You can't be sloppy. You can't overlook things. And I don't know if SunPower has displayed those levels of execution that you want to see from a business in this competitive industry.
It's basic fundamentals, repeating the right process, doing things the right way, not making mistakes, and being consistent with delivering results. And you're right that they haven't. I'm hopeful, Tyler. Disclosure, I own a little bit of SunPower from years ago. It was a very small position that I've been sitting on. Is just a reminder that just because there's a great idea doesn't always mean a great business is going to execute behind it. But I think you're right. I think if there is anything here, they got to prove it first. They need to demonstrate some results. I would personally be more likely to add to ENPH, even as much as that business is struggling, because they've taken actions to position the business for now and for the future. And they've, like I said, they've demonstrated in the past that they can make a lot of money and they have a really strong balance sheet. Do you have a pick in the solar space right now that you think might be interesting?
For solar, but they're not really residential. They're much more on the utility side. And if you look at what some of the growth projections they are going with in the massive backlog of orders they have, that looks like a business that has a much more predictable future over the next several years.